Hello, everyone. I'm Erin, also known as Breakfast Candy on Roblox, and it is my pleasure to welcome all of you to our Level Up Roundtable on social features, featuring Blockface Steve and Blockface Bob of Block Evolution, as well as Roblox's own Game Insights game designer, Dan. Dan, take it away.
Thanks, Erin. And hello, everyone. Welcome to Level Up. Today, I am joined by the Block Evolution team, most well known for their game Club Roblox, and then really excited to talk to you guys today about social features. Blockface Steve, Blockface Bob, how are you two doing today?
I'm good, thank you.
Yeah, good, thank you.
If you guys don't mind, I think I'll call you Steve and Bob for the rest of the day.
All right.
Yeah, fair enough. Cool. Well, let's get started. How long have you guys been on the platform for?
So we both joined about 2008, 2009 time, and we just played back then. I believe we then quickly got into development, messing around with Roblox Studio, and sort of played for a good few years. Nothing serious back then. And it was about 4 to 5 years ago that we started developing seriously on the platform. And we started off with the two of us and my brother, and we started making a game called Zoo Simulator. And that's when we sort of formed the company as it is today.
What really inspired you to start making games, or at least opening up studio and start editing things? Do you remember?
Originally, it was just curiosity. Me and John are engineers. We did robotics at university, and so we've always had a huge interest in technical systems, especially programming, mathematics, etc. So I guess from a young age that was an inspiration, but certainly more recently, we started during our university years, and we were looking to do something productive instead of lots of theoretical programming and maths.
I needed to get away from my homework.
Yeah, basically. We just wanted to do something in the real world, and we also realized that we can make some money doing it, and it seemed like a good business venture. Both of us had previously had businesses, so it seemed like a good thing for us to start.
I see. So rather than writing essays and actually doing your homework, you guys decided to just make games instead.
Basically,
a lot more fun.
Yeah, we're just justifying it.
Well, awesome. Could you tell me what your role is on the team for each of you?
So I'm Steve, and I mostly work on sort of analytics, backend systems, and sort of general sort of design of based on the analytics. So I take the analytics and I choose what direction we try and focus our development on.
Yeah, so I tend to do more front end, so like UI, sort of how the user plays with technical aspects of the game. So like our systems do with pets and babies, etc. So a lot of the sort of front end client work.
Okay. And so for the audience, what are some of the projects that you guys have worked on?
So I think Alex mentioned our first project was Zoo Simulator. And we sort of made Jurassic Tycoon, which is a classic sort of tycoon style game. And then our sort of first big hit that most people will probably know maybe is Heists 1 and 2. And those were like a first person shooter sort of open world game. And that was our first step into bigger sort of exploration type games. But our main bread and butter for the last 2 years has been Club Roblox.
We've had a few other games and sort of tech demonstrations we've done here and there in between, but those are sort of the main ones.
So for those who haven't played, what's Heist about?
Heist was an interesting sort of combination of taking a tycoon style game and then meshing it with a first person shooter. So it was really competitive. Players could steal from other players, and you wanted to level up and upgrade your base to be more secure against being raided.
Right.
So that was almost our first experience with social gameplay, where we were getting players to interact with each other and almost set them back and make challenges for each other to play with.
It was a massive learning curve at the time, especially with the amount it got exploited because of the nature of the game. So it really challenged us, and in a bad way at the time, but in a good way certainly now, because it meant we could go on to build, Club Roblox.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, they seem just like such different genres. How did you go from a tycoon building sort of shooting game to a lovely social environment that is Club Roblox?
Lots of failure.
Yeah.
Lots of failure.
Yeah.
That's yeah. Try something, if it burns, just throw it in the bin and
I
start
mean,
another
we
one.
tried heist too.
Yeah.
That was a task.
I see. Okay, well, let's get on to the main game that we wanted to discuss today in Club Roblox. Could you tell the audience a little bit about what Club Roblox is in case they haven't played it before?
Yeah, go on.
Okay. So Club Roblox is more like a sort of digital city. There's no rules into what we can add, but the main sort of basis of it is like a social role-playing exploration-based game. So there's lots of mini games people can play. They can have houses, they can explore a city, and they can play together or host parties. There's loads of different features, and it's really sort of our attempt at making a metaverse vision work in Roblox.
Right. Well, I'm glad that you mentioned social, because that's what I wanted to drill in with you today. You know, very often for us on the Game Insights team, we kind of pair it to developers all the time. Social so important, social so important. But for you guys, what does a social experience actually mean to you? Like, what does it mean for your game? What does it mean for the design of the game? That sort of stuff.
So for us, the fundamentals of a social game is all about making a game feel alive. So when people join our game, we don't want them to just sort of move around it on their own. We want them to find dynamic experiences that are constantly changing. So as a developer, you might be like doing lots of updates to change the shape of your game as much as possible, but that's a lot of work. So we lean into user-generated content and socially generated content a lot to make the game feel alive and more personal and more enjoyable.
So in a way, you're sort of just building the space, and then you're letting your players do the work for you in terms of creating their own gameplay and their own experiences, right?
Yeah,
that's the way we want to think it's happening.
Fair enough. So how important do you actually think social interaction is to like the success of your game, and maybe to an extent Roblox in general?
I think it's a massive multiplier, and if it's underutilized, then that's not a good thing, because it can extend gameplay, it can improve retention, like all of these sort of game metrics that are worth measuring can be massively improved just by having a lot of interactions, a lot of friend making, a lot of sort of player density.
Yeah, absolutely.
Are there any social like features or gameplay that seem particularly popular, at least with Club Roblox players?
I think the most like obvious one is going to be parties, where people can host their own. So people have got houses, but they can create their own server, and people can find that server and join it. So you get these really, it's sort of a phrase we're going to use quite often, is player density, where you get as many players together in a small space, and then you get lots of high frequency social interactions. And players love that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the nature of that role play as well is sort of family orientated. We see a lot of, I mean, you see this in a lot of games on Roblox, but certainly ours is very commonplace for people to sort of start role playing as kids do in reality.
Yeah.
You know, like families, getting pets, stuff like that. So yeah, that's always a good one.
For those not as familiar, can you explain what a party system is, or how it fundamentally works?
So it depends how technical we go, but generally you're going to have like, maybe you've got 18 or 26 players in your base game server. But if you want to create a party around a specific group of players, you're going to need to open up another game server and teleport players to that place and have a way for players to discover it. So the way we do it is we leverage message service, which is really useful. And also there's memory store, which is a new high frequency read write system, and then also private servers. But you just make a special server, and then you teleport lots of players to that server, and you get a much higher player density. And you also help get rid of the performance costs of running that inside your main gameplay server.
So when you're talking about player density, you mean like if I want to play, in your example, family, right? Being able to sort of aggregate similar players that want to play that same experience together on the same server?
Absolutely. Because only a small percentage of your users are going to act as like what we would call nucleation sites, where so these are people who are like slightly older, who are typing in text chat and really initiating social engagement. And you might only typically have one or two of those people per server.
Yeah.
So you need to move as many people past to that player as quickly as possible for them to then find someone else to socially interact with. And then it's a bit like a snowball. It gets bigger and bigger and more people socialize. So yeah, that's what we like about player density, is it makes social interactions much more common.
That makes a lot of sense, because me being a socially awkward kid, I would have never started my own little like play group or something. But if I'd seen one that was doing something that I was actually interested in, I'd definitely be much more willing to join and actually play with other players. So I think that's pretty critical part, as you're talking about, in terms of player density and getting enough players to actually play and experience with one another. Are there any, let's see, how successfully do you think the average Roblox game is at encouraging social interaction?
Well, I think typically in the past, social interaction was easy because games had to be small by design for performance games. But as Roblox has got more powerful as a platform, we've seen worlds get bigger and bigger and more complex. And that means player density is going down as a result. Right. So these social issues are becoming the #1 problem that developers are facing. So designing bottlenecks and designing ways to get players to congregate in these big digital cities is going to be a really important part of developer work there going forward.
That's really interesting. Would you say that the social interaction is more important now than before, or about the same?
I would say it's getting more important, especially considering like in this sort of COVID pandemic world where people are not going to school as often, or they're not seeing each other in the play park. You're going to need to start forming and maintaining these social relationships online in your game more than you used to have to in the past.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, if there's more distractions, so to speak, of different experiences out there that are potentially available to players, you definitely want to be the one that allows players to aggregate together and actually, socialize with one another. Do you see like any common missed opportunities from developers? Like when you're playing some of the other games on Roblox, what are some of the missed opportunities that you see for social interaction?
I think quite often there's a disconnect between the way people are communicating. So for example, you can't often, I think we're going to get onto this a bit more in a minute, but you can't often tell what's going on with the social interaction. So there'll just be a lot of people stood around awkwardly for long periods of time. Right. And maybe some of them are typing, or some of them are in some menus, and you can't tell by looking at them what they're actually doing. So sometimes you don't know whether they've gone AFK or they're doing something else. So I think there's some opportunities there to develop some features to aid that.
Yeah. So I think a couple of key examples that we employ is if someone's in the menu, the avatar will get like a book out and open the book and start looking through the book. So when you look at someone, you know that they're not ready for a social interaction because they're in a menu or they're doing something. But if someone started typing, then 3 dots come above your head. And then that gives you a cue that someone's typing a message. So you hang around and you wait for that message to see what's happening. And those are some really powerful sort of what we call social hooks in our game.
Yeah, it just makes it feel a bit more personal when you know what other people are doing, as opposed to just seeing them stood around for 30 seconds and not sure what they're doing.
Yeah, there's no worse a feeling than building up the courage to sort of introduce yourself to someone, and little do you know they're off editing their avatar.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so that's really smart. So basically just giving players feedback in terms of if or when they're socially interacting with one another. Okay. So how often do you guys update your game, would you say?
We do a pretty major update every week at the same time on a Friday. So that's our update schedule, and we stick to that pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, we've done basically over 2 years now of weekly updates, and I don't think we've missed or changed a week. So We do other updates as well. Sometimes we'll release, bug fixes or release extra content midweek, but usually it's just the Friday update.
So between the updates, even as frequent as they are, would you say for like your most engaged players that social interactions are the primary piece of content that they kind of engage in between those updates?
Absolutely. So between updates, you're like slowly going to fade player count as people get sort of bored and move on to other experiences. So this is why our sort of God statistic is retention. And we've worked out that if people are playing with their friends or they're playing socially, you'll generally see about 30% better retention from those users than users playing alone. So if you've got players acting socially, you're going to keep them for a lot longer, and then you can spread out your updates or retain more players when you roll into your next update.
Sure. A lot of our updates as well seem to be focused around or tend to be focused around social interaction by nature and by design. So a lot of the time we're releasing new content that can be used socially or encourages social interaction, such as new house templates for role playing, new furniture items, new push chairs for children, etc. So a lot of our updates are geared in that direction anyway.
Yeah. Why do you guys think that, or what's your theory behind social interactions having such an impact on retention? Like, what is it about those social interaction that motivate players to want to return to your game specifically versus just any other game on Roblox?
So I think the key thing with social is that if you think about like the number of ways you can play the game, if you've got a base like obby start to finish, there's only one way you can play it, which is you just get straight to the end. Whereas if you're playing it with your friend and there's a mechanic where you can push your friend off the obby, suddenly there's 100 different ways you can play that obby, and it's so much more fun. So finding ways to add that sort of social cohesion, it just makes your game 100 times more fun and makes so many more different possibilities for people to explore, which would be so much more sort of enjoyable. At least I like pushing Alex off obbies.
Wow, that's interesting. So there's one way to play if it's single player on an obby, but when you can mess with other players, it creates a whole slew of different immersive levels of gameplay. Well, you guys have basically answered my next question, but my next question was going to be, would you say social interactions make your life as a developer easier or harder? Or is the answer both?
Harder in the sense we need to think about what's going on and what we're doing, but way easier in terms of the result of implementing them. Because of the way, the nature that they scale the game experience and the way people play the base game.
Yeah. Well, what do you mean by that? Like, what about the social interactions makes development harder? And then what about it makes it easier?
So one of the challenges you've got when you've got social gameplay, so we've got a multi-place game. So we have to keep social interaction together across when people teleport or go around the universe. And it's a bit of a brain melting problem at times to solve. So keeping people together, and it also will force you to design your game differently. So even if you've got this perfect vision of this big, expansive exploration map, if your player density goes down to the point that nobody's going to see anyone within 15 minutes, and it's let's say it's a player versus player combat game, you've got to now find out how you get combat back into an empty map. So it kind of pushes you and pulls you in multiple different directions from a game design perspective.
I see. So it presents very difficult game design decisions, but shipping it and having that content sort of last is much easier. Is what you're saying. Okay.
Yes.
So how can you as a developer facilitate a positive social environment for your players in your game?
So the key thing is going to be about like giving that what we call social hook. So something positive that players can revolve around. So as mentioned, we do an update every week, and we'll have like a countdown timer that all the players will be excited for, and they'll get together and we'll have like these countdown parties where people are all socializing together, waiting for this update to release. So it's really what's going on around these social interactions and how you incentivize them, whether you find ways of rewarding players for being at the update early or for working together to solve a problem.
We kind of do that in other parts of our game as well. Like, for example, we have a pizza game where players work together, sort of collaborate. And I mean, you can do it on your own. You could go through and you could just do each part of the sort of mini game yourself, but it would be time consuming and inefficient financially in order to earn tokens. So having like a big group of people each operating different parts of the sort of pizza production line results in much better sort of community income. So you see servers that everyone's working really well, and sometimes you see servers where they're not working particularly well. And that's sort of rewarding. So you get people trying to organize each other, saying, hey, you do this, you work, make sure the oven doesn't explode, and you put pizza toppings on, and you make the bases. And that results in a lot of social interaction between users.
I was going to ask, based on your example earlier of pushing friends off the obby, do you figuratively see that for the pizza shop as well? People messing with pizzas and things like that.
Yeah, as a careless game designer, I somehow left propane cans in the corner of the pizza kitchen, and there's an oven, and you can imagine what players like to do with the propane cans.
I see. Well, we kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, but I kind of wanted to dive into the topic a little bit more. For those who aren't necessarily playing with friends or might not necessarily be as comfortable with initiating a conversation, what are just some of the things that you can do as a developer to sort of facilitate those social interactions for those kinds of players?
So something we used to do, and we're going to start doing again soon, it's just sort of in flux, is we have a trading system, and we give rewards based on tasks. And one of the tasks we had was to just complete a trade. So they'd get like a reward of a number of tokens for just finding someone, trading with them, and then receive that reward. And that sort of incentivizes people to communicate and try and initiate a trade, which did work pretty well.
Yeah, that was really good. And also just having, so we've made a quick access button for emotes. So a lot of our mobile and tablet users don't really like using text chat because it's quite, they have to come out of what they're doing, and it's a bit clunky to use at times. So just having a button where they can tap and go sad, and then they emote sad is really, is really good for like role play or just communicating with friends, or like waving to people when you teleport to them. So finding non-verbal ways of getting socialization to happen in the game is super important.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Sounds like there's a lot of layers of social interaction there. And other things that come to mind for me that you guys already mentioned, like your pizza shop, naturally is just going to facilitate that social interaction, even if you don't know one another. Aggregating players together into a party, it's another way to find people with common interests. So it seems like you guys have given a lot of thought from multiple different angles in terms of how to facilitate that social interaction.
Yeah, we've tried a lot of different things, from like what I suggested, really low level sort of solution, up to just general, trying to reduce the sort of bar to entry for communication.
Well, are there any ways that a game can actually get in the way of social interaction? Like it's almost fighting the ability for players to socialize with one another.
Well, the biggest issue that I sort of touched on earlier is we have a multi-place game. So if you're with your friends in the starting world, and then your friend runs off through a portal and goes to another game, they suddenly become detached from each other, and that social gameplay gets fragmented. So that's one of the biggest challenges, especially as we progress into this sort of metaverse Roblox, where worlds are getting bigger and multi-place worlds are becoming more common. Maintaining social connections across places is going to be really difficult. But you can look at message servers for like cross-server messaging as potentially a solution. There's loads of sort of matchmaking tools you could create using the new sort of APIs, particularly memory store. So yeah, it's going to become more of a challenge in regards to like multi-place worlds.
Did Club Roblox start out with multiple servers, or did you sort of expand over time?
Very quickly. Yeah. If I remember correctly.
So because we started the project about 3 years ago, and 3 years ago you couldn't really support games performant. So we were pushing like 55 players per server, so quite a high server load. So we needed to go multi-world just for performance reasons, and then that forced all of those issues. But as time's gone on and we've got more efficient, and I think sort of Roblox servers have got a bit more efficient, particularly with Lure U, we've been able to bring players back into less worlds and stop separating them as often.
So if I'm a developer on a smaller game, would you recommend multiple servers, or would you recommend starting out small and slowly building as your player base builds?
I guess it depends what you value. So for us, we wanted that high player count and we didn't want to compromise anything. But then we had the issue of we wanted to add way more content. Well, we couldn't add more content and keep the player count high. One was going to have to be sacrificed unless we added more servers and more worlds. So that was the sort of solution for us. We wanted, this pizza game. We wanted a vet game. We wanted a school. Well, we couldn't add that to our base world because it was just too much load. So we just had to add separate servers.
Right. So you felt that that individual social interaction was more important than aggregating all of your players on a single server.
Yeah. I'd
That
say
makes sense, because like if you have a pizza place, an ice cream place, and this, and it's all in one server, in a way, you're actually segmenting that amount of players into those different areas. But if you're having separate servers for the pizza place, the hospital, the ice cream, now you can have 50 players making pizza, right? And 50 players making ice cream.
Yeah,
sure.
The pizza place just isn't fun if it's just you on your own. So we have to find ways of making that busy and active.
Right. Okay, well, I think we just reached our first Q&A break, so I will pause for a minute. And Erin, do we have any questions for the Block Evolution team?
We have a few for you. So first one, in a highly social game like Club Roblox, how much can you rely on players teaching each other how to play as opposed to creating more structured tutorials for them?
Yeah, that's a good one.
I think it's social gameplay definitely does mean you get like a good chance of there being like social help. So I've seen people say like, hey, where's the pet shop? And people being like, oh, it's this way.
You see it a lot when we do events for updates, and there's like a task to do, and one person, kids like completing the task and then showing off to their friends or other people in the server that they know how to do it, and that is really useful. Yeah, we see that a lot.
It's really good, but you can't always rely on it. I think you have to definitely design in sort of more social cues, or not social cues, environmental cues, and just make your game sort of fairly easy to understand. As a priority.
Yeah, for example, if there was a server where there was no one that was willing to show how to complete something or do something, and everyone was sort of stuck, then that wouldn't be an ideal situation.
Got it. All right, thank you for that. So one more question. When you add a new social feature, how do you evaluate its success?
So we like sort of A/B testing all of our sort of core game features. So what we'll do is we'll give 50% of users the sort of control test, which will be like the game without that social feature. And then we'll give the other 50% of users the new feature. And then we'll measure their performance over the next week. So we'll see like how much like group A is retained over group B, and also like how much money they've spent or how long they've spent in the game or how many sessions. And then once that sort of test is run, we'll look at the 2 bits of data and we'll say like, okay, this group is performing a lot better or this group isn't. So interestingly, this week I was running a test where we gave people a sprint button or people didn't have a sprint button. And you'd think, oh, a sprint button is really useful and great for getting around the game. But it actually like massively reduced day one retention. So maybe people were running past each other and there wasn't enough social interaction at that point, or people were exploring the game too quickly and finding it isn't as good as they wanted it to be. I don't know. But yeah, this A/B testing is the key way to work out if your features are good or not.
Sure.
Awesome. Okay, last one. Many games distribute players into different worlds based on their progression, like player level. How does that affect the quality of social interactions? Is there anything lost by reducing interactions between newer and older players?
So splitting people up based upon like their sort of game skill level, right? Okay.
It's really good to do that. So in heists, the entire like concept of the game was about sort of robbing and stealing from other players, which meant if you had a low-level new user enter the game and you had like a really high-level user, the high-level user would just constantly rob from the new user, and the new user would be like, oh, this game sucks. I can't get any progression here. So keeping them apart or finding ways to protect or level up your new users is really crucial.
Yeah, like so I think like obviously progression in a game is one of the most crucial things you can have by any sense of progression. For example, like obtaining more money or improving a level or improving some skill. And you want obviously in like a competitive environment, such as a mini game, potentially, you need progression. You need something to aim for. So if that progression results in one player being significantly better than another, that potentially isn't good. So yeah, certainly splitting people up will help there.
All right, well, that is all the questions we have for now. Thank you.
Awesome. Some great questions, by the way.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Aaron. Thank you, everyone, for the questions. Moving on, we're going to talk a little bit about social features. So my first question for you guys is, how do you know what kind of social interactions your players are actually going to enjoy? Like when you're sitting down to design a feature, what sort of knowledge are you pulling on to create those features?
Well, so this is the thing, is that we don't always look for our players to enjoy the social interaction, because sometimes you get really good social interaction out of like argument or dispute. So if someone's jamming up a conveyor belt with 200 pizzas and someone runs over and goes, "What are you doing?" That's kind of like one of the funniest and best social interactions in Club Roblox, and it's technically a negative one.
It results in a positive outcome because they socialize, they have fun as a result.
Yeah, it's I think the key thing is just trying to find ways of naturally getting those social interactions to happen. If you say like, you now have to talk to this person for 5 minutes before we'll let you through this gate, it's like, I don't like them. I don't want to talk to this person. So just, natural social interactions always outperform forced ones.
Would it be fair to say that, social interactions that create stories are the ones that you kind of want to go for and design for, based on your pizza example?
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
We certainly see that a lot. People will sort of get that social interaction started in a situation like, or a place like the pizza place, and then it will turn into something with a story. So that once the social situation has begun, then they'll start saying, "Hey, do you want to role play as this? Do you want to do this? Do you want to, go to my, my house? Do you want to see my pets?" or something like that, and it progresses there into more of a story.
Oh, that's fascinating. So like they start out by just messing with other players, and then it organically turns into a social interaction.
Surprisingly quickly as well.
Well, for you guys in designing, social features for Club Roblox, how has that evolved over the past 3 years of working on the game?
But I think everyone who's ever done like the minimum viable product launch knows that social features kind of go in the bin. Everything else is broken. I'm going to work on this and forget about social features for now.
Yes.
That's the way we started with Club Roblox, and then they slowly became more and more important as we finally, figured out how to develop a game. And the key thing, as we said, was like retention. If you're trying to get your game off the ground, retention is the one thing that you kind of live or die by. So if you've got an easy 30% retention game, just out of social interaction, just go for it really hard and get it out as quickly as possible. I think we'd consider it minimum viable product now, whereas in the past it was like a 3 months later we'll worry about it.
Yeah. So you believe at this point, 3 years later, you guys are in like the minimum viable product.
We're still in alpha.
I think so. A billion plays, but still in alpha as far as we're concerned.
I think that's the most Robloxian thing I've ever heard. You see all the tags like pre-alpha version 0.03 and pre-alpha 4. Yeah.
Guilty.
Okay, so I wanted to shift gears a little bit and dive into some UI questions with you guys. Aaron, I think we have like an image we wanted to share for this. There we go. Great. So my next question for you guys is, how does Club Roblox facilitate social interaction through its user interface?
Well, as you can see on the screen, there's an example of it. So we have a social menu, which is really easily accessible right at the bottom in the middle. And it has that sort of icon of sort of 3 people, 1 at the forefront and 2 behind. And by opening it up, first you're presented with the parties sort of view, and there's 3 tabs on the top. So switching to friends you can see a list of your Roblox friends and whether they're online with the green or red sort of icon on the left. And then you can expand it and you can sort of access like family and build permissions. But the crucial thing is on the right, there's a teleport button. So if they're online on Club Roblox, you can see where they are and you can teleport straight to them. And that will teleport you to their server and then onto sort of their physical location, so that's passing over to John. He did the sort of back end for it and I did the UI.
Yeah. That's the main thing, is just because as I mentioned, we're a multiplayer game, so getting people to be able to quickly just find their friends again if they get separated is super important.
Yeah.
So I'm going to throw a curveball at you, because I've talked to developers before and I've told them, hey, teleport buttons are going to be beneficial because it'll get you to right with players. And there's been a big concern about, but then they won't experience the world. They're not going to run across this thing or this thing as they're trying to desperately try to find a friend in the world. Like, what would you say to those players in terms of the trade-offs between having a teleport button and not?
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. And I think there's many situations where not having a teleport button is crucial or is more beneficial. But I think in this case, in just getting to your friend, I think it's more beneficial to just get them there and get them sort of, where they want to be quickly. Maybe, for example, if we did an update and they needed to navigate to the pet shop, we would sort of physically show them the way, because that's more beneficial, that they know where the pet shop is for future reference. Whereas their friend's moving around, they don't need to know the way to their friend every time. Well, their friend's not going to be in the same place. So just teleporting them, getting them there and getting that social gameplay going, I think is more crucial. I don't know what you think about that.
Yeah, I totally agree. I did an A/B test where we tested, so when people join the game, either we gave them like a GPS to navigate to the next location in the tutorial, or we teleported them straight there. And people who walked retained a lot better. But I think the data analysis would show that social gameplay retention is a lot better than sort of finishing the tutorial retention if players join looking for social gameplay.
Sure.
So I would prioritize it, except for maybe in tutorial, but that's up to developers to decide.
I see. So it depends on the intent then, right? If you're trying to teach something or introduce the player to the world, you want them to get acclimated to it and where the pet shop actually is. If the player's trying to find their friend to play with, there's no benefit of them meandering around your game for 10 minutes to try and find what room they're in.
No, exactly. They're probably going to become bored or annoyed or
So my next question is, I noticed that there's a nearby tab here. Could you talk about that a little bit? And Aaron, can we show an image of that? Yep.
Yeah.
So what's going on here?
The thing we noticed from quite an early stage is not all players are going to be Roblox friends on the website. Maybe their sort of parental permissions don't let them add friends that easily, or they just don't want to go through the rigmarole of going through all the menus. So enabling players to form social connections and social bonds and sort of play together almost as if they were friends without being friends is just an easy way of sort of leveraging that social gameplay.
Sure. Yeah, quite often you see people in a server chatting away to someone else, and someone, another player will come over and say, hey, can I join you? So that's where this tab comes in. So this tab sort of shows a list of all the people in your server. And you can expand that sort of each row as a person, you can expand each row and you can add them as a friend. So there's the button on the left that's red. If you click that, it will send them like a Roblox friend request, and that will go green. And if you're friends, and then obviously they'll show up in the friends tab as well. So, and then there's this sort of family and build, same as before, to enable other permissions.
I see. So after Olivia 24 has ruined your pizza belt, you can add her as a friend and enjoy.
Yeah, or if you're already friends, you can unfriend.
And you can. We've got because you can build your house in our game. You can also let other people build in your house. So we could let Olivia come and trash our house after she's finished trashing the pizza.
Yeah. Or we can enable a family tab, and she can then start. That's another like permission group, I guess, which means she could play with the blinds, or she can turn lights on and off, or whatever else we choose in the sort of in-house settings for family.
Yeah. All right, I'll make sure to add Olivia, and we can have some great house destruction role play together. I had a follow-up question. So you had mentioned your chat, and how does the chat First of all, what sort of treatments do you do to the UI for it? And secondly, how does it benefit your players for social interaction?
So the first thing we've actually done is we've changed most of core GUI except for chat. And that's because we wanted it to be familiar and easy to use. So any Roblox player that comes into Club Roblox will know straight away where the chat box is, how to find it, how to use it. Where we've done a lot of overhaul and work is in bubble chat. So the chat bubbles above people's heads. Because we've got large, expansive worlds, when people are talking, we want people to be able to just see in 3D space that they're being directly addressed. And also falling back on the 3 dots, sort of like thought bubble when people are typing, again, gives people the social cue to wait for someone to finish typing.
Yeah, I mean, all social media tend to do this. You know, there's some instant message systems, so Facebook Messenger, WhatsApp, etc. You know when someone's typing, and you then give them time. You know not to put your phone away. You know to wait for them before you send a message. So it's the same thing. It sort of shortens that distance between users and their computers.
Right. It makes sense what you said, wanting to have that bubble above their head, because if they're constantly looking to the top left where the Roblox chat typically is, it's going to ruin the immersion, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we've discussed some of these famous places where diabolical things happen in your game, but I wanted to dig into that a little bit more now. What are some of the locations where players are role-playing in your game?
So houses is the big one.
Yeah, definitely in the houses, and then leading on to parties from that.
As the image says, that's our pizza place.
Sure.
That's the best sort of social role play area we've got going on at the moment.
There's a
So
few
that's
sort of
the most popular in Club Roblox at the moment.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, along with that and sort of ice cream, which is a very similar sort of reskin, I guess. Yeah, so there's another image of that. So basically the goal is just there's a production line, and users sort of handle part of the production line, and as a result they all receive income upon completing either making a pizza or making an ice cream, etc.
So you're actually granting them like currency that they can buy pets and housing items and stuff. So
Sure.
In a way, you're like rewarding them for socially interacting and attempting to function with one another.
Yeah, attempting to.
Yeah.
Okay. Aaron, we had a few others. Let's see. Yep. Supermarket. Some of this.
Yeah, so this is more leaning towards the unstructured role play. So this isn't a factory job. So players just can go and open up the drive-through, and then they can, what we often see is people will be waiting at the drive-through and they'll type in text chat to tell all the other players in the server that the drive-through is open. And then people will get their cars, go around and sort of pick up different bits of food and stuff, which is really sort of cool and fun to see.
Yeah, quite often there was, well, certainly when we released it, there was huge queues of people waiting for the drive-through. It's kind of
really?
Yeah, it's like 10, 15 cars all queued up.
And all of this is happening organically. Like you guys don't set up like a prompt for it, like it's just players.
They got pretty angry when someone crashed their tractor into the drive-through. So again, it's sort of falling back on that concept where not all social interaction has to be perfect. And in fact, the less perfect the social interaction, almost the funnier and more engaging it is.
Yeah, humor is incredibly important, for sure.
All right. What is this one here?
So we've done a seasonal Santa's workshop. So this is part of our Christmas update this year, where players are making toys.
Wow.
And one of my favorite sort of social components of this is when people box up presents, the little name tags on the boxes are drawn from the player's friends list. So it's a way of sort of reminding people that they do have friends on Roblox and sort of inviting them, trying to encourage people to invite them in, and just finding those little tiny sort of social hooks can be really powerful and fun to do as well with developers.
Sure.
What name pops up if they don't have any friends on their friends list? Do you guys insert your names in there? Tell them.
I might do.
Yeah.
There is a default lookup table.
Yeah. Okay. And finally, what is this one here?
So that's just a view inside our latest, one of our latest house templates. So you can see there the sort of hand to interact with different things.
social building.
Yeah, social. So yeah, people can role play together. They can sort of sit on furniture. They can use, a lot of our items are very interactable, and they are result in lots of different social interactions. So like a lot of our kitchen furniture, for example, you can get items from the fridge, you can cook it, etc. So that often results in quite a lot of interaction and role play.
Yeah. And people building together.
Yeah, certainly. So they build together, and they build, like, they'll divide up the house and say, you can have these rooms, you can have this room, this can be this room. And then they'll start sort of role playing together and building their sort of dream house with their friend as if they live together.
Is it often just friends that are doing it, or do they pull in like other players on the server and just start building and creating with one another?
I'd say it's like 50-50 between sort of friends and just people generally like coming together on a server. So for example, we've got like we're going to say the word pizza about 200 times in this group, but there's a pizza shop house and people will like set up a restaurant and start inviting people over as customers, and then like someone else in the server might come along and say, oh, can I help run the pizza restaurant? And then they'll role play that together.
Yeah, so, yeah. And we also have like a coffee shop and a vet, and except there's quite a list of different
other foods are available.
Yeah, yeah, maybe not from the vet, but they just act as like social cues and then sort of framework for people to start creating their own content. It just gives them ideas. We find that quite often people can continue a sort of social interaction quite well if they're sort of given like an initial idea.
Right. So you just give them like the initial spark, and then they kind of just like run with it.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So we talked about a lot of different social spaces in your game. As like as an environment artist or a level designer, how do you design spaces that actually encourage role play?
So we have like this town sort of hall place, or sort of town world in our game, where it's a really sort of quite small space with not a lot going on, but a really massive player count. And I built the map as like almost like a fishbowl or a dome lens shape. And that just encouraged everyone to sort of focus and congregate in the middle. And then that's where like the main trading activity happens within the game. It's where the most of the socializing works.
All the updates deploy there as well. Yeah.
So if you've got a big map, building bottlenecks or places where lots of players are going to come together, like the pet shop is really common for people to go and trade in. So you can still have these big games,
sure,
but just think about creating bottlenecks or like areas that people are going to want to hang out in.
Like parties as well, being like a customizable hangout and a personalized hangout, as opposed to just a generic place.
So we kind of already talked about how the jobs in your game encourage players to interact with one another, but how do you decide what jobs to put into your game? What is it about pizza and ice cream that's so popular?
I don't think
Domino's.
It's the ideas aren't super important. What's more important is how people are going to interact with it. So the great thing about pizza is it's a multi-part process that everyone can get involved in, and there's room for things to be sort of broken or sort of messed about with. So it's less about the idea and it's more about how it's going to be operated.
Sure.
I think it's the key thing with that one.
You need like a multi-step system that results in an outcome in order to like break down into different parts, and certainly with the sort of methodology we've used.
And how does the player's avatar, or how does avatar customization in general play into the role play and the social interactions?
It's a big part of parties. So if people are making like a pizza kitchen, you're going to want to let them dress up as a pizza chef, for example. And if you let people sort of, because they're sort of, Club Roblox is more like a digital city where people move in and live. So they're going to want to bring their own personality into that space as well. And with a free avatar customizer in our game, even our players who might not have a lot of Robux or the ability to customize their avatar on the website can still create their own identity in Club Roblox and then start socializing with that identity as well. So it's super, super important, if not one of the most important things.
Sure. I mean, something we thought about when we were designing. So with the avatar editor has been through quite a few revisions, and its most recent revision, we wanted to make it social. So when we were thinking, how can we do this from an avatar editor, and basically the sort of thing we came up with was allow people to share outfits. So we have mannequins that you can place in your house, and you can, when you make outfits, they're sort of saved in like an outfit slot system, like in your backpack. You can walk up to that mannequin, interact with it, and select an outfit. It will load it onto the mannequin, the same as it does you. And then anyone else can walk up to that mannequin and they can collect that outfit and put it into their sort of outfit inventory.
Wow.
So that results in like parties with these huge array of outfits and people creating outfit rooms, etc.
So in a way, you have like players. Players are actually like changing their outfits for role play, and they are able to conveniently do that because of that system you just mentioned that you put in.
Sure.
Okay. So we're running out of time here, but the last feature I sort of wanted to talk to you about was your trading system. Can you talk about that a little bit and how that facilitates some social interaction?
The trading economy is a big part of like our gameplay and player progression. So enabling players to trade incentivizes social interaction. So if players want the next like rare pet in the game, they're going to have to talk to someone to get it, which can be a really, really, really good social sort of starting point for players who might not want to just drum up like a social chat and make friends, but they definitely want the sort of limited flying pig, for example.
Right.
So that's the fundamental feature in trade, is that it's incentivized social interaction.
Sure, we see that a lot in like our town and our social areas. People saying, "Hey, I'm looking for XYZ," or "I've got XYZ," and advertising themselves almost to a trade, and creating that social interaction immediately themselves.
What kind of players does it appeal to? Is it your entire audience, or do you find like there's a specific niche that's all about trading?
I would say there's certainly a niche in terms of like at the extreme. Like we have a lot of sort of collectors and sort of extremely invested users, but quite often a lot of people are trading. I would say that's maybe not the the younger players, but a lot of sort of mid-age group do trade.
What kind of things do they trade?
You can trade anything in our game, pretty much anything but houses and money. So we've got toys, we've got cars, we've got pets. They all love trading that. We just don't allow currency trades, just because that enters a whole load of potential issues, especially from an economy management point of view. But generally, the more that people can trade, the more opportunities you have for social interaction.
What is it about trading that creates such like a satisfying social experience for players?
I guess most people see it as like mutually beneficial, and it's very satisfying. Then, if someone's got something you want and you've got something they want, and you swap, you're sort of both benefiting each other.
Absolutely.
Do you guys design content with trading in mind, or is it just something that you've set up and sort of just runs on its own now that the game's live? Yeah,
definitely. I mean, this Friday we're releasing some content, which we won't name just yet, and that will be tradable, and it will be limited in terms of the amount of time it will be accessible. So yes, definitely.
All right. Well, I believe we're out of time. And I wanted to thank you guys again for joining us on Level Up. Final question I had for you is, for developers that are looking to make their own games more social, what's like one piece of advice you would give them?
Get creative. Which is really generic, I know, and probably super unhelpful for people looking for the golden bullet. But like our biggest social wins have been in places like the pizza place, where it's just like a completely abstract concept and it's really fun. And it's not your generic, when you think social feature, you think, oh, like friend menu, oh, teleporting, it's like boring. Go make explosions in a pizza factory. It's a lot more fun.
Yeah, no, definitely. I would say that, and thinking about how other solutions external to Roblox exist, like for example, the sort of chatting and the way we were saying, bringing out like a physical item when someone's in a menu, for example, that really helps sort of shorten those distances. So looking at things you can bring from the external world, and also the way people communicate in reality, bring that into the game.
So leverage what you know in the real world.
Yeah, exactly. Try and do something different, I guess, or different on Roblox.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I believe that's all the time I have for questions, but I know that we have a lot of questions from our audience. So I will toss it over to Erin, who will go ahead and ask them.
We sure do have a lot of great questions here. All right, first one. Have you implemented voice chat? If so, have you seen an increase in retention?
So we have a big problem with voice chat in that I think it's limited to server sizes less than 33 players. So all of our like sort of main hub worlds are 55 players. So voice chat isn't enabled in those places. But in terms of parties, I don't know if you saw in the slides, we've got 3 types of parties. We've got dance parties, baby parties, and pet parties. I think in the next couple of weeks, we're going to experiment having sort of voice chat only parties. And we're going to A/B test and have a look at all of the data involved in that. It'll be really interesting to see the data from it. I really encourage sort of people to try and test that out, and maybe I'll share some consensus on Twitter as to what we find out.
Yeah, we'd love to know as well what other people find from that.
It was a really good question. Yeah.
Right, you update very frequently. How do you go about creating social interactions that players want to play without overwhelming them? Has there ever been an update you put out that wasn't well received?
Yeah, there's been loads that have been put out that haven't been well received. And weirdly, the most complicated ones are generally not well received. So, and quite often the ones that we put the most effort into are the most complicated. So by the very nature of that, the simpler, quicker updates tend to do quite well. So certainly they can be overwhelmed with the amount of sort of content and, etc. they're being faced with. So keeping things simple, and certainly thinking about sort of 2 or 3 key things that you want to achieve from an update. If you're sort of focusing the update on marketing, obviously, then yeah, simple.
All right, kind of a follow-up to that. Has there ever been an instance that you created an experience that decreased social interactions? And if so, what happened?
These are good questions.
Yeah, they're making me think.
Decrease social interaction. I think potentially the life cycle of Club Roblox is we sort of started out with like a base game with like sort of 5 or 6 worlds. And then about 5-6 months ago, we probably had like 9 or 10 different worlds. And the game was getting really difficult to follow and explore and understand. And players were just sort of starting and joining the game and then wandering around and then getting lost and then leaving. So yeah. I think over the last few months, we've gone back to basics.
Sure.
So maybe realizing when you've overextended.
So a chain of updates that caused us to overextend for sure. Yeah. We had a lot of worlds that sort of were acting as connecting worlds for other worlds, and it was just quite sporadic. So that wasn't, ideal, I guess, getting into that situation in the first place.
All right. How do you manage to find content to update every week for 2 years? Is it mostly cosmetic?
We are scraping the barrel at the moment. So we rely a lot on seasonal updates. So, it's Christmas. So we've done 3 Christmas themed updates each week.
We did 3 Halloween as well, I think.
But it's also helped that one of the key advantages of Club Roblox is we put no design rules. Like if we want to do pirate ship update, then we can do pirate ship update. If we want to do sort of big ice resort update, we could do that.
Sure. Yeah, try and just think outside the box. I mean, that's certainly what we do. Just in terms of literally everything.
Yeah.
All right. What is a good average play time for social games?
Per session?
Yeah, probably you want to look at least like 10 minutes plus. I'd say is generally the benchmark of like a good social game. It depends also on your audience. So if you're looking at like the younger age groups, say like the 9 to 10-year-olds on sort of mobile and tablet, their average session length might only be like 8.5 minutes. And you will really struggle to increase that because they're much more casual players. But rather than looking at session length, we try and look more at retention. Like, are we getting these people to come back and play more often in the future?
Awesome, thank you. Last one. Are you very active on social media? What social platforms do you use to promote your game? And how do you balance posting on social media while also doing your weekly updates?
So we weren't active at all, and we now are active because we've just hired someone to do it for us, basically. So yeah, we don't balance it. Someone does it for us, and yeah, she's doing a really good job. She's just basically started posting on our Instagram almost every day and on our Twitter almost every day. So yeah, that's massively helping. Our engagement's flying up on those platforms.
Yeah, I think it's super useful, and it can be a really powerful marketing tool.
Yeah.
But one of my favorite things about social media is that you get to connect with your users and understand how they're playing the game. Because quite often, like if you join the game, it'll be difficult to understand like what people think of the game or what they're enjoying about the updates or what they find difficult or confusing, or how many bugs I've introduced. Usually quite a few. Whereas on Twitter or Instagram or any sort of social network, I'll get all of that feedback and some more, which can be really useful in a game design perspective.
Sure. Yeah, it's nicely consolidated, sort of generally good quality information.
Awesome. Well, that is all the questions that we have and all the time that we have as well. So thank you all for attending and asking such amazing questions. I'd also like to thank, of course, Blockface Steve and Blockface Bob and Dan for an awesome roundtable conversation, as well as Missimo and Dinosmore for their support for this event. For everyone who's watching on YouTube, thank you for tuning in. Drop your questions and comments below. We'd love to hear from you. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the Roblox Developer Relations channel. More Level Up videos are coming soon.